like I was getting in the same time that I was being indoctrinated into this cult, I was getting a degree in genetics. And like, I like to think that makes me pretty smart. Like, it's like a pretty hard degree.
Mm-hmm.
So like, and it just works because it's not about intelligence. It's just like, they're really good at exploiting how humans think.
Welcome to Breaking Stereotypes with Todd and Tootsie. Today we are joined by Shaylee, who was in a Christian cult during 4 years of college. Now she educates on cults and abusive religions through her TikTok channel, Scaredy Cults. Today Shaylee will attempt to break the stereotype of someone who is a cult member. But before we get started, I'd just like to remind our viewers to hit the like button and subscribe to our new channel, which will help the YouTube algorithm.
Welcome, Shaylee.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Thank you for being on. So we'll start with, what do you think the stereotypes are of a cult member?
Oh gosh. Okay, so I feel like people have like a very scary image of people that are in cults. So like they imagine somebody who's like a robot and who like is totally weird or like socially different, and like that you, when you look at them, that you could be like, that's a cult member. That's one stereotype that I've noticed a lot. But a lot of the time people like me, like literally no one in my life knew, like at all. And then another one would be that cult members are people that are weak or dumb or easily manipulated, when that's not the case either. Those are the two big stereotypes that I've encountered in my interactions online.
Mm-hmm.
And your channel's done such a good job of bringing awareness to what it's like to be in a cult and what some of the tactics are and things they do that kind of lure members in. So we'd really like to start with some of those main points. And I know a lot of your TikToks cover these things, but just to start, like, can you tell us what maybe some of the signs would be if you might be in a cult?
Yeah, so a good guideline is the bite model. And it's kind of just, it's literally just a list of tactics that cults use to control people. So it doesn't, my experience is more with religious cults because I am in the Bible Belt and they're very prevalent here, but they can also be political, or so I'm probably gonna skew a little religious, just so you know. But big warning signs would be trying to take up a lot of your time is a big one. I know that when I started to join, the more time they can take from you, the less outside influences you'll have. And a lot of people were noticing, like, these people are very demanding of Shaylee's time. Also, if they really insist on you meeting one-on-one, that's a big sign, because that is a good way where they can sort of use groupthink. So like what they'll do is they'll have other members there, and then if you're meeting one-on-one and everybody is agreeing with what they're teaching you, then it's very easily to be swayed that way. So that's another big red flag, is if they insist on one-on-one meetings. Yeah, those are two of the big signs. But again, those may be for more like Bible studies, which is what I'm familiar with. But from my experience as well, a lot of self-help groups that end up being cults use that as well. If they have teachings and they demonize other groups and say like, oh, they don't know what they're talking about, or like, isn't ours so much better? And like, they try to put themselves constantly above other, and like everybody does that a little bit probably, but like they really insist like, we have the best answers and everybody else, aren't theirs not as good? And that sort of mentality, that's also a big red flag. Those are some of the big ones that I can think of right now. And again, that may skew more for religious groups, but that's what I'm more familiar with.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So what were some of the recruitment tactics that they used on you?
Yeah, so they immediately, the reason they're on college campuses a lot is because they're looking for people that are vulnerable. And in college, you're on your own for the first time. You're separated from your family. You may not know a lot of people for the first time. So they're looking, that's the first thing they do, is they even teach you this when you're going out to recruit people as well. Like, we target college students because they're questioning and like they're, they don't have a lot of influences yet and that sort of thing. So they grab you really fast at the beginning of the semester when you don't know a lot of people. they use a lot of love bombing. That is such an effective tactic, is love bombing. Like everybody is vulnerable to love bombing. And they will use that a lot. And that could be like praising how like open-minded you are, how smart you are, and like buying you stuff and like buying you meals a lot and showering you with gifts. They use that a lot. Also, one tactic they use right off the bat is kind of isolating you from your like friends and family in relation to what they're teaching you. So they'll be like, oh, this stuff, like what we're teaching you is really great, but not everybody is as open-minded as you. So like maybe don't like tell other people. Because if you go telling people like, I learned this in Bible study, and it's really manipulative and weird, and you don't realize that, and other people are like, well, wait a minute, then you're less likely to come back. So that's another tactic that they'll use. Again, like I said, they immediately start to take up as much as your time as possible. That way you have less time for outside influences. And that could be just hanging out with you, inviting you to lots of Bible studies or events or like whatever they're doing. Yeah, those are the big ways that they manipulate people in the beginning. And then once they like build that rapport with you or like that good relationship with you through all these things and you start to trust them, that's when like the teachings start to get more manipulative and different.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of like dating a narcissist.
Yeah, no, if you understand abusive relationships with people and like narcissists and those sort of things, like you will see so many similarities with what they do. There are so many similarities to abusive relationships. Cult leaders are always narcissists. There's like a lot of similarities there. So yeah, if you're familiar with that, you'll see it.
Mm-hmm. So you were raised Christian, and this was a Christian cult. So at what point did they kind of vary from, or I should say pivot, from what you were traditionally taught? And did that raise any red flags for you, or did you feel like it was enlightening in some way?
So what they do in the beginning, it's all different, and that's how they make themselves look better, but it's different at first in more innocent ways. So like they'll teach more like science-based lessons. Like there was one about Noah's flood and how it's a regional flood and not a worldwide flood, and they tell you why, and you're like, oh my gosh, that makes so much sense, and it goes with science. And so they start with more innocent lessons. That way they build that relationship and that trust, and you're like, oh, these people know what they're talking about. And then they start to get weirder and weirder. So like there's how they divide, there's 30 lessons. There's beginner lessons that are not so weird. Then they call them intermediate lessons that are like challenging you a little bit. And then there's advanced lessons. And the advanced lessons are when things get really, really culty. But by that point, you're like already like, oh, I trust these people. And like, they know what they're talking about. I mean, look how smart they are with this other stuff. So you build that trust already. So it gets progressively like more skewed away from traditional Christianity.
Right. Mm-hmm. And that kind of speaks to what you were talking about in the beginning, where people think people in cults are dumb or whatever, but really they didn't come at you with the crazy stuff up front. They just did a slight variation that you might align with, and then over time they get to that, and by that time you're already in, right? Yeah,
that's a really important point, because when I'm telling you this stuff, I'm presenting it to you like, this is a cult. Here's the information up front. You get it all. I'm telling you all the worst and the weirdest. And clearly what you see and hear, it's like, oh, this is a cult. But that wasn't my experience, because it's very slow grooming. People who enter cults don't know that they're entering a cult, and there's not many signs. Like it was advertised as a totally normal Christian Bible study, and it was very normal at first, and then you slowly it's over the course. It took me a whole year to get indoctrinated. It's a very slow process. It's not like they just come at me like, hey, want to worship our Messiah? And I'm like, oh. But yeah, that's a very important point, is that people who enter cults they don't get the information that you get. They're lied to, and there's information withheld, and it's slow, and it's manipulation.
So when did you find out that the cult leader was claiming to be the Messiah, and what was your reaction?
So it's over the course of 30 lessons. And they slowly sprinkle in like setting it up for this throughout the first 29 lessons. Like, oh, here's proof that, you know, he's coming soon. And this is what it'll look like when he does come according to the Bible. So we should be ready. And then they present it to you in the 30th lesson. And it's like, ta-da. And they have like a numerology, like prophecy. So, and like, they bombard you with so many numbers that you can't really argue. And you're just like, okay, I guess. And I remember that was kind of my reaction as they told me. And I was like, oh, okay. Yeah, I guess that makes sense. Because I couldn't really argue. I'm not a biblical scholar. I can't really argue with these people who are literally trained for years to convince you. I can't argue with them. So I remember just being like, okay, this is weird. And just kind of shell shocked a little bit. And then like slowly started to believe it. But yeah, it's in that big 30th lesson is when they tell you. And then they invite you to church.
Okay. And so at what point did you start to question if even that kind of revelation wasn't enough, I guess, of a red flag, or, you know, you were sort of still going along with it? So what made you change your mind and think there's something wrong here?
I think this is most people's experience, but it'll be like a series of a few red flags that start to like, like start to make you think, because they do a really good job of like thought suppression techniques, like to stop you from thinking about those things. So then like the first red flag for me was I was watching a documentary about cults, and then it said about the Moonies cult. It showed one of their mass weddings, and it was like, mass weddings claim thousands of lives every year. And I said, whoa, claim is a scary word, because we also do mass weddings, and I never thought of it as claiming lives. So, and then with that first red flag of like a similarity, I started to notice other similarities between the group I was in and other cults. And then also just, I have ADHD, and they really demonize mental health. And like, if you, like whenever somebody leaves, oftentimes they'll be like, well, they had depression or anxiety, so I'm not really surprised. And it's like it's like they don't outright say it, but you can tell from their attitude that they really demonize mental health, and they discourage you from getting medication or seeking therapy. They want you to come to them about it and stuff. And that was another red flag, is that I opened up about how during the pandemic, my ADHD was getting really hard to manage with how church was. And they basically told me to pray it away. And I was like, well, that's not how that works. And like, they told me that they were a cult that, they didn't tell me they were a cult. They told me that they were a church that believed in science. So I was like, you believe in science, and now you're telling me to pray the ADHD away? That's not how that works. But it's like little red flags like that slowly start to kind of untangle the web that they've put there, or the net.
And so when you said you were at the University of Georgia, and you were living at the church for most of your time there. And so most of the contact you had was with other members, correct? Besides classes and things like that. So did you ever have discussions like with the other, and were they all female?
Yeah, everybody I lived with were they were women, and there were men in the church, but like you're not really supposed to talk to them very much because purity. And so like most of my conversations were with other women in the church. And if I did open up, because I did open up about the ADHD thing, and that's when they told me to pray the ADHD away. So there were things like I would come to them and I would like open up to them about, and what they do is they like kind of collect that information, and you could tell they kind of use it later against you. That's another thing I noticed. But yeah, I lived with them. I did open up to them about some of the things, and all of their answers were very not satisfactory. And especially because I'd already started to think about cult manipulation, I started to see the patterns in what they told, how they responded.
How soon did you move into the church, and was that common amongst all the members to be living there?
I think it's common for the people that they deem to be good members. So like I was like considered like a catch, like for this cult. They were like, yes, look at her, she's smart and she's pretty, and she like, you know, obeys the word, and like it really loves God and all this stuff. So if you're like really what they consider to be like a model member, then they may invite you. It is a common thing, especially in America, because the cult here, most of the church buildings are also houses because the church isn't big here. So like they kind of dual function. Like they use the house, like they use houses as churches. So it is common here. And I moved in I think I was in the church for a little less than a year. And then they invited me to move in, and I hated living in a dorm. I hated it so much. So I was like, yes, I will live with y'all. And I would get my own room, or I thought I was going to get my own room. I ended up having to share a room anyways. So, but yeah, so I moved in like a year after.
Okay. So it wasn't much different than the dorms after all, except for the fact that you really couldn't leave.
Imagine the dorms, but every time you have a conversation with somebody, it's about how you're doing spiritually, and you're being drilled. You're like, it's about church stuff. So it's like, okay. And there was even a point where they were upset with me because I'm an introvert, and like it was a lot all of a sudden living in the church and like constantly having people drill me. So they were even like, you don't talk to us, and like they like pushed me to be more extroverted. And I think just because they wanted to tie me in more, but it was a struggle.
Mm-hmm.
So you moved in there about a year into your studies, I guess you would say. And then you were in the cult for 4 years. So at what point did your mind start to change? Like what year?
It was a little ways into the pandemic. So I would say probably January of 2021. Is when because I had the good thing about the pandemic. There's no good. I don't want to say there's good things about the pandemic. The pandemic's tragic, but one thing that happened because of the pandemic is that I got separated physically from the church. So I was at home with my family, and so I wasn't hearing the indoctrination every day. And then that's when things started to kind of fall apart, and I was like, oh, I don't know about this. Like that's when I finally had the wiggle room to like start to think about things.
Okay.
And so, yeah, I would say I've been in the process of doubting for like a year because it was last January.
So what was the process like for you to begin leaving?
Oh, geez. So like you said before, I was living inside the church building with other members. So it was really scary because I started to doubt. And then it was just like, not only are you starting to doubt this, but there's so much pressure because I had responsibilities in the church. I still had to teach Bible study. I still had to do like tech for the church, like run service on Wednesdays. That was one of the things I had to do. And I had to go to service every day. So like I'm doubting, and then I'm having to go to service. And it was just like mental warfare. It was the craziest feeling. And then, also, at the same time, my parents had gotten a divorce and sold their house. So, like, even if I wanted to leave, I didn't have anywhere to go at that time. Like, I had to just kind of, like, hunker down and, like, try to figure it out while I was there. And, yeah, that mental warfare is the only way I could think of to describe it. So, once I had decided, like, I'm pretty sure this is a cult, like, I went and stayed in the UK with somebody for a month to get away, and I like decided to leave.
This was a non-cult member.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because I wasn't supposed to have friends outside of the church, but I still did online because that's the only way I could have friends and them not know. So I wasn't exactly a model member by the end of it. But so yeah, I went and stayed in the UK, and then I was like, okay, yeah, I'm leaving. And we thought of different plans. Like I finally opened up to my family about it so that they knew I needed to like get out of this building. I was like, okay, I need you. I know you don't have a house right now. I need us to figure this out because I'm in a cult. Sorry. And they were like, oh my God, okay, let's figure this out. And they thought about like building a small house outside of my mom's boyfriend's house. They thought about me moving in with my grandmother, but that would be a disaster. So then finally, luckily, my mom, who she's dating, they get along really well, and he's kind of rich. So they were able to buy a house. And then once they bought the house, I had somewhere to go. I just lied to the church, and I was like, yeah, I'm got a new job. I'm going to move back to my hometown, but I'll go to the church in Atlanta because it's kind of close. And they were like, okay. And then like they were trying to like coordinate with me, like, okay, well, how do you want to, do your leadership responsibilities. And I was like, whatever, dude, just I'll do whatever, because I had no intentions of following through on it. And then finally I moved physically out, and like I knew that I wanted to do it. I was going crazy. I needed to get out of there. It was when you don't believe that stuff anymore, but you're forced to go to service every day, you go nuts. So like I got rid of almost all my clothes. I donated so much clothes, and then like I was trying to just lighten the load as much as possible so I could move in one go, and I did it, and we moved me out in one go. And then I just told them after I was physically out that I was leaving the church.
Did you do it through email or something? How did you do
so
it?
they use like encrypted messaging apps.
Wow.
I wonder why. But so I think the one they use is called Line or like Telegram, like those sort of things. So I just sent them a Line message to one of the church leaders, and I was like, I'm leaving. No one speak to me again. This is a chapter of my life I'm closing. Bye. And I said, tell anybody who needs to know. I don't care, but don't message me. And then I just deleted the app. And then I got drunk, and then I panic deleted everybody from my social media because I was like so stressed.
Yeah, I can imagine. And then at a certain point in time, you decided to tell the world by creating a TikTok channel. And I would think that might be scary a little bit, because you're putting yourself out there, and there's a lot of people that could see that and know you potentially.
Yeah. It was. I couldn't decide how I wanted to try to help. I couldn't just sit and do nothing. That's just how I am. And I knew that one thing that helped me leave was finding other people on TikTok who had left the same organization. And I found a couple of girls, and I got to talk to them, and they connected me to other people who left. And that was one of the biggest helps. So I was like, oh, TikTok really is a really good tool for this. I think I got to do it. And I just decided that helping people was more important than worrying if people think, like people who know me think I'm weird because I was at a cult or whatever. They probably do. They've probably seen it, but I don't care. And I just decided that was more important. So it is scary, especially because I don't want the people in the organization either to try to talk to or get mad or like see me as a target. I don't know how many of them know about it. I don't know if any of them do, but yes, it is very scary. But I have already helped one person out, so I consider that already worth it.
From out of the same cult?
Yeah, the same one, which I was not expecting, but she messaged me because she found my videos, and I was like, already? So I think more people leave than I thought, but we'll see.
What do you think that what the end game is for these people? So like if you would have stayed there, what would have happened in your life, do you think?
Yeah, so I can only speak for the cult I was in. I'm not so sure about the motive so much of other cults. I know ultimately a common goal amongst them all is to make money. Like they're capitalist cults as well. They sell, like the one I was in sells merch, and like they sell CDs, and they charge you for educations, and they get huge donations from rich members. They love rich members. They literally, one of the big red flags was when we were recruiting new people, and some of the people were like, we need to find people who will donate money to the church and like are rich. And I'm like, that's what we're basing it off of? I thought this was God's organization that like wouldn't care. But so a big one is they just make money. That's one of the big goals. The leader lives a very lavish lifestyle now, and buys anything he wants and has people around him all the time. But I know for mine, another goal of it was grooming women to being brides for the cult leader. So that's kind of what I was on track to do. And they're just like, they're like spiritual brides, but like then it's like more than that really. And then like the brides that are the most dedicated are the ones who get abused. So, that's for my cult, the two big goals was make money, groom women.
Well, sex and money, right? And the
Yeah.
oldest two things in the world as far as what people want.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And
that's very common amongst lots of cult leaders, sex and money. That's what it's all about.
And you mentioned you were on that track. How did you feel at first knowing you were on this track to marry the leader? Was that exciting to you? Did you feel like special and chosen?
Yeah, well, you get a little bit of a choice. I felt pretty pressured into that direction because lots of reasons, but I was excited for it because when you think it's like this innocent thing, you think there's no physical contact and like it's just spiritual and it's just like that you're a model person for what you believe is the true religion. Like you just think that you're very special to God, and like who doesn't want to be special to God? Like so I was very excited to be one of God's brides. And I thought I had no idea about the abuse and stuff. I literally did not know until I already decided to leave, actually, is when I found out. So yeah, I was all for it. I mean, like I was a little sad because I did want to get married in real life one day, to somebody. I've always wanted to get married. But I was like, you know what? This is God's history and all this stuff. And I was like, this is a big deal and I'm going to be rewarded in heaven. And so I was all for it. I thought it was just an innocent thing.
So now that you have left the cult, what are your beliefs?
Good question. I don't know. I don't know. And I know one belief I hold now is it's okay not to know, because for years it was like pushed on me, like, here's the one set of answers and this is the right set of answers and everything else is stupid. And I do believe now that like it's okay if you don't know everything. like it's okay to wonder, it's okay to think about things. I think that's really important, is to actually engage your brain and like think about what you think your purpose is and that sort of stuff, and not just let people tell it to you, but to think for yourself about it. And it's okay if you don't know. Like we're really obsessed with labels. Like I'm agnostic, or I'm this, or I'm that. And it's like, I don't know. And like, that's okay. So right now, if I were to need to describe to somebody what my beliefs are, it would probably be agnostic, because like as I was deconstructing, it all kind of crumbled for me. But I'm still open in the future to religion. Like I'm not closed off to it entirely.
Mm-hmm. Do you think in the future it would be that non-organized type, like you would kind of stick to yourself or go on YouTube or something and not join a group?
Yeah, that would be ideal. But, yeah. You know, I have friends who are very progressive Christians who kind of give me hope for organized religion in my future, but I don't know. Yeah. For now, it is definitely on my own. Mm-hmm. No church. Goodbye. I don't think I could step into a church for a long time, but maybe one day. I don't know. I don't know what the future holds.
So how would you describe, because, the expert here, as far as, the difference between a cult and a regular religion, like Scientology or Mormonism or mm-hmm. Christianity?
So this is not a perfect analogy because I am not a psychology expert. I'm not a health expert, but the way that I make sense of it in my brain, because I have ADHD, so I understand how the diagnosis for ADHD works. There are going to be people who have symptoms of ADHD, even when they don't ever have it. Like everybody struggles to pay attention sometimes. Everybody struggles with executive function sometimes, depending on all these outside factors. So that's why a lot of people question if they have it. But it really, how you diagnose it is a collection of a lot of things you fit, if that makes sense. So like, to me, a cult is when you look at something like the bite model. And if you can check off a lot of those boxes, and and it's not just like one little thing, like maybe a little bit, but like cults are very clear. Like they use so many of the same tactics, and it is a collection of symptoms that would diagnose. I don't want to I don't know if that's a perfect analogy, but that's mm-hmm. how it makes sense to me. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Sure.
Yeah. So
you're saying like religious, they may not meet all the diagnostic criteria, because mm-hmm. but some religions are maybe a little more culty than others.
Yeah. So like some people try to tell me, like I'll say like, okay, so cults will do this one thing. This is one thing that they will do, and I'm going into detail about it. And then people will say like, the Baptist church does that, so they're a cult. And I'm like, wait a minute. I was a Baptist. I can tell you it can be toxic and it's not okay, like some of the things they do. But it's not a cult. Like, we need that label to be separate because it's a different type of abuse, and we need to be able to identify that type of abuse, because cults want to blend in with other religions. The more that they can, the better. So we need that word for cults. Sometimes other religious groups will fit some of the criteria, and that's not okay, and it's abusive, but that doesn't make it a cult. So it needs to be you hit a lot of those check boxes, whatever, not just some of them. But again, all religious trauma and abuse is very valid. So it's not different. It's not to invalidate people who have suffered abuse from other groups. It's just different, and we need the identifier, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And I know one of your videos went into the importance that the church has been to certain communities, like the Black community. And so you said you want to be careful to not put all religion or all churches into this bucket, because there has been good that comes out of it. And so I don't know if you want to speak to that, but I know you talked about like keeping an intersectional perspective on things when you're talking about religion and religious abuses. Yeah.
So Donnell Wrights is who taught me that. He's on TikTok, and he talks about how like it's important to not just, and there are lots of creators on TikTok, if you get into religious deconstruction, talk about this too, but this is the one that stuck out to me. And they talk about, and he talks about how like your perspective of Christianity cannot encompass all of it. And if you apply your one white perspective, it's not to invalidate it, but if you try to apply it to everything, that's just erasing all of that cultural history for other people. And that's just an act of white supremacy. Like, that's just erasing other people. And it's not productive, and it's not good. And he basically explained like the Black church, because in America, they suffered so much, but a place of refuge for them was the church. And the church was a community for them when they didn't have it other places. And to erase that is just not helpful. So we can criticize the church as an institution and as a belief system, but also like without erasing all of the good it's done too. And there's nuance, like people try to make it like a black and white thing. There can be nuance in these conversations, and it's essential that we use nuance and it's not so black or white, because that is just simplifying it in a very non-constructive way, and it's not going to do any good.
Makes a lot of sense. So we're going to kind of switch to the fallout. Did you feel like you were robbed of your college experience?
Yeah, because recently, Go Dogs, they won the national championship.
Right.
And I was like, I'm going to post on my Instagram story. And I was looking through photos, and you can see I have photos from the beginning, like the first few months, and then it just drops off. I don't have anything. I didn't go to parties. I didn't make friends. Outside of the church, I didn't go to football games really. I was on the dance team. I quit the dance team, which I regret so much, but their practices interfered with Wednesday service. So I was like, I guess I won't do it next year. So I lost the dance team. I just missed out on so many experiences, and not only the experiences, but I was like, they mentally drain you on purpose and physically drain you, so you don't have energy for other things and other people. And so I struggled education wise. I did not do well. My GPA is very bad. I don't know how I made it through because they were just draining me of my energy. And I feel like I wonder about a lot, like if I hadn't been in a group that was just completely draining me all the time, what could I have done? Like, could I have done better? Because like now I'm not even working in my field, and I just wonder if I could have chased those opportunities more. So yeah, both in like socially and in my education and career, I feel like I was robbed of every aspect of the college experience, because I was brought in like as soon as I got there.
Mm-hmm. And
so
now,
I lost a lot.
Now you're obviously rebuilding your life. What is the healing process like for you?
So there's been like a few different aspects of it. First, rebuilding the relationship with my family was the first thing, and one of the most important, because I did pull away from them a lot. So I spent time rebuilding that and trying to train myself. Cause like after 4 years of like being so secretive from your family, I instinctively feel like pulled away from them. Like I want to like hide away and not tell them things. So it's been a lot of working on being open and like valuing my time with them. Also I've just done a lot of research on my own, just to try to understand what happened to me, because if I don't make sense out of the trauma is not going to go away. You got to work through it.
Sure.
So doing a lot of research on my own time, also going to therapy. And then recently I've been reconnecting with friends that I kind of just dropped because of the cult. Thankfully, they've all been very understanding. So reconnecting with people that I just shut out, that's been a big step. And then also just recovering health-wise, because like I was so stressed and sad that like I developed an eating disorder and like stopped taking care of myself. And so I've been trying to rebuild health-wise my relationship with food and trying to work out more, and definitely need to rebuild my health. And also financially, because I couldn't have a job for like that whole year, because I was like, if I need to leave, if I need to get up and go, it's going to be so much harder if I have a job in this town. So I just didn't get one. Mm-hmm. And it was so hard to try to get by financially. So I'm trying to rebuild that too. I'd like save up money and like get to a place where I could pay my student loans and stuff. So it's been all the aspects of like I got to rebuild from the ground up is what it feels like.
Mm-hmm. And so you seem to have a really positive attitude despite everything they've endured. Where do you think that comes from?
I will say this. I'm very lucky because a lot of people don't get the support net that I got, like from my family. So like I know people who were leaving at the same time as me, and then I would interact with them a lot and talk to them a lot, and I thought they were going to leave too, but they ended up staying, and it's because they didn't have the support I did. They did not have the support from their family and stuff that I did. So I as much as I would like to give myself credit, it's also that I'm just lucky and I have really good circumstances, and I'm very blessed in that way.
Mm-hmm. Sorry,
go ahead.
I just had to ask this question because I think it's important. What do you think somebody who didn't have the support system that you had, how would they be dealing with it, or didn't have the resources to get therapy, or all those different things? I mean, is this something that you feel like could really wound a person for life?
Yeah, because I feel like therapy is absolutely essential. I know not everybody is lucky to get to go or like to afford it, but that is because cults completely rewire how you think. Like, I don't think people really understand that it's not just like you're in a controlling church. They use tactics that change the way your brain works. So like it messed with my executive function. It messed with my ability to trust my judgment. It messed with so many things that I'm going to have to literally rewire in my brain. And if you don't have a professional to do that, that can be crippling. And it can be hard to get back into a job. It can be hard to get back into like, even so my cult was like very, very big on purity culture and like, don't even think about boys. So there are people who have been in it for 10 plus years, who literally don't know how to talk to men. They flat out do not know how to associate. They can't have a conversation with them. They can barely look at them. So it's like, that's a big obstacle that to try to undo all that damage by yourself. It's going to be crippling when you go into the real world again. And so that's why a lot of them, when they don't have that ability, it's just easier to go back into the cult because that's what you know. You've already got a support system there. So like you try to go out and it's just too much. And then they go back in. And that's what happened to one of my friends who was leaving at the same time as me. I tried to be a support system for her, but like ultimately across the internet, I can't replace a family and I can't replace friends or therapy. So yeah, people who don't have those resources, a lot of the times will just revert right back. They just go back.
Mm-hmm.
Do you find yourself sometimes falling into old patterns of thinking and old mindsets without just, reactionary because of the amount of sort of brainwashing or programming that you had?
Yeah, there's been a few situations where I will know something and like I can tell it's happening and I just completely don't trust myself. I'm like, because for years I was just like, I cannot rely on my own judgment. I have to ask God, or I have to ask the leader. I have to ask the church leader. And so I can still tell that I have no trust in my own judgment. And then I end up being right every time. And I'm like, it's so frustrating. Like I knew it, but, and then also because they teach you like this is one of the biggest things is when you're in the religion, then you're in God's domain. So you're protected from everything bad. Nothing bad's going to happen to you. You're going to be healthy. You're going to be safe. And then when you leave God's domain. So like all the time, even though I don't believe this anymore, I'll get in these like mental spirals just downward where I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to get cancer. Oh my God, I'm going to get in a car accident. I'm going to like all this like horrible stuff's going to happen to me. I'm scared of airplanes now. I'm scared of storms now. And I was not before. And that has been one huge, almost debilitating way that I keep falling into that pattern of thinking, even though I don't believe the church anymore. And I don't think that stuff is true. But they did a really good job of planting that fear.
Sure.
So it's been like so hard to undo that. That's been the biggest one.
Yeah. So it sounds like there's a lot of triggers that trigger kind of this magical thinking that they inspired, as far as if anything bad happens, it's because you did something bad, even if it's a storm.
Yep. Like one example is just like the airplane thing. Like when I went to the UK for a month, I had to get on a plane and like I knew that I wasn't supposed to go or like according to them. So they like told us when you're in the group, like, oh, he prayed for church members. So anybody in the church will never get in a plane accident. Like it'll never happen. He prayed for it. And, you know, he's like this with God. He's the Messiah. So it's true. And I was like, oh, thank God. I'm scared. I was like not a big fan of planes. So I felt safe on planes. And then when I left, I was like, I don't have that prayer anymore or that guarantee. Like, and I just was like so anxious. And like my friend had to be like, you know, that is a programmed fear that they gave you to try to keep you in, because the scarier the outside world is, the more you want to stay. And I was like, sure. Oh yeah. Like you just got to get out of that. Like you just spiral downward. You just got to get out of that.
Mm-hmm. So how much has it helped you to make all of these TikTok videos where you kind of just start explaining to everyone what you went through, what all the signs and, you know, symptoms are?
It helps me in a few ways. So like I said before, I have ADHD. So I have what some people call B's for brains. So like whenever I'm thinking of things or like trying to piece things out, as long as it's up here, I can't make sense out of it. I have to like process it externally. So making videos gives me an opportunity to like, because they're only 60 seconds, I have to talk about one thing at a time. It gives me a chance to look at an aspect of what I went through and pick it apart and like understand it really thoroughly enough to make a video about it. So in that way, it helps me process information and my experiences and like trying to communicate my stories that I went through and what they implied helps me process it too and understand it. So it's been good for me, just like information processing and understanding my experience in that way. And then also just in a way of like, it makes me feel like I have some control over what happened to me. Because in a lot of ways you feel like, oh my God, I was just like taken advantage of and there was nothing I could do about it. And even now it's like ruining my life. Even when you leave, it's hard. So it gives me an opportunity to be like, frick you. I'm fighting against what you're doing and you can't stop me. And I have control in this way. So it's been really good for me in that way too.
Mm-hmm.
And what's the response been from, you know, all of your viewers?
Mostly positive. I get a lot of people who are genuinely very interested and want to know and want to help. And then there are people who are just morbidly curious. I was morbidly curious about cults too, and I was in a cult, and so everybody's interested in them. Mm-hmm. So it's been mostly positive. The only negative, some people don't like that I won't say the name, and they think that I'm making all this up because of that. But like in reality, I'm just trying to avoid harassment. Sure. But so that's been one of the big criticisms, but I don't think I'm going to budge on that. And also a lot of people, like we mentioned before with stereotypes, I get so many comments every day that are like, you must be stupid to fall for that. I would never. And like, it's like, okay, good for you. Like, that's not true. Anybody could fall for it. But so many people like just want to call you, like berate you, call you stupid. So it's been overwhelmingly positive, but those few people are hard.
Yeah.
Sure.
Have you heard from a lot of people who are saying, hey, I think I'm in a cult and looking for help or advice on how to get out?
Yeah, I've had a lot of people message me about other cults that they were in or a family member is in. So I've been trying to collect their stories, and hopefully in the future, I want to try to bring awareness to other cults as well, not just mine. But yeah, I've had a lot of people who tell me about like my family member literally just up and left, and she like over the course of the past few months, she lost like 40 pounds from fasting, and like she's completely changed and she won't communicate with her family anymore. Like, and just like examples like that of people being like, what do I do? And it's hard because you can't save people from cults really. So I have a lot of people wanting to do something, and I just have to try to like help them do as much as they can in these situations, but ultimately they have to help themselves. So yeah, a lot of people, more than you would ever imagine, have reached out to me being like, I lost a family member to a cult. And it's made me realize, because I didn't know, they're everywhere. There are so many of them. There are literally so many of them. I had no idea. When I started to realize that I was in a cult, I was like, man, what are the odds? Like, this is such small odds. Like, one of the only cults here. There are so many. There are so many. Like, they're everywhere. And every day I'm learning, like, I get messages about new ones, and I'm like, dang, they're just like amongst us, but not to like over scare anybody. Just be aware.
So you said there's a lot of online resources. I'm wondering, if there was ever a time during your experience where you just Googled the church or the cult, I should say, and maybe found a Reddit post or something, and then or decided to do that yourself at this point, like where you can out them, but you can do it anonymously.
Yeah. When I was in the church, I never did that because they teach you like, Satan uses the internet. There's slander online. If you look it up, don't look it up, don't look it up, don't look it up, because it's like the equivalent of a bullet wound to the soul, like is what they would say. So I didn't look at any of that stuff up when I was in the church. But if you, I connected with somebody on Reddit, like you said, my friend who helped me leave just was like, put in the name and see what you could find, and you just type in the name. And then there are people all over the place who are talking about their experiences, and you can get connected to them. I got connected that way to the girl on Reddit and got to talk to her. There's girls on TikTok who I typed in the name of my cult and found them and got connected to them. So yeah, if you're in a group that you're not sure about, type in the name, see what you find. There are lots of people. That's the beauty of the internet, is everybody can put their information out there, and then it's easy to find.
Yeah, that's why I'm so surprised that it's so pervasive to this day, just because I would think that, again, maybe it's because people are vulnerable or, they maybe lean towards that way anyways, but I would think a huge red flag would be, don't look us up.
Yeah.
Yeah. But at the same time, if they're so good at that they
Sure.
Sort of brainwash you ahead of time into thinking that.
Yeah, Satan's running things on there, so you can't go on there.
Exactly.
Another thing you told us was that a lot of times if a cult gets outed, they'll just rebrand under another name, right? And so that's another way that they can kind of remain hidden.
Yes. The cult I was in is on name 3, I think. Like as like a whole religion is on name 3. That's why I don't really see the value in me being like, this is the club name on my campus, because as soon as I do, they're just going to rebrand. Like they've done it before. They're just going to change the name and come back. So like, I sincerely believe the best way is to learn about the signs, so that regardless of the name, you can identify these groups, because they do that all the time. They change the name. They've done it on multiple campuses just in my group that I know of. I just don't see the value in naming them by name. It'll just get me harassed, and then they'll just know to change it.
Yeah. And that's an old trick. I mean, you're too young, but there's a company called Amway that was multi-level marketing, and it got to the point where Amway, if anybody said they were from Amway, people would run away in the other direction. So then they changed their name to Network Associates or something like that. But essentially, it was
I didn't know that they ever changed.
It was the exact same thing. But if you said you were from Amway, you clear a room out really quick.
It works.
It works. Yeah, it does. It's the thing too that we really haven't, given the cults credit, is that they're extremely smart, and but they're using it for evil, or however you want to say it. I don't really believe in the word evil, but for abuse and profit, and all kinds of weird things. And to think in 2022. That it's more pervasive than ever with the internet and all of the resources. It's kind of mind blowing, because we Tootsie and I were kind of joking before the podcast about how, in the movie Airplane, again, maybe you haven't seen that, but it's from like 1980, I believe. But there's a scene where the pilot goes through the airport and all the cult members from the Moonies, and I don't remember what some of the other ones were.
Like every religion approached him.
Yeah, and he just he was trying to get to the airplane, so he just like punched them all out like on the way on. But that was a joke like back then, that and they were handing out flowers in the airport. And they don't do that anymore. It sounds like they're just much more sophisticated about it at this point.
They've had, because like, all these religions have been around for so long. These like high control groups have been around for so long. They've had generations and generations to like figure out how to manipulate humans. They're very good at it. They've got it figured out. And like it's like exploiting human psychology. They've been doing it for so long. They know it works. They know it doesn't. They've had a lot of time to perfect this, and they really have. They're very good at it. Because like, people say that, like, I was getting, in the same time that I was being indoctrinated into this cult, I was getting a degree in genetics. And like, I like to think that makes me pretty smart. Like, it's like a pretty hard degree. So like, and it just works because it's not about intelligence. It's just like, they're really good at exploiting how humans think and how we work.
Yeah.
So in the beginning of the interview, you mentioned the BITE model. And since that was so important in helping you to come to an awareness of what was happening, can you just explain the acronym and kind of talk about each point?
Yeah, so it's basically just, to put it simply, it's just a list of abusive behaviors that cults use. It's just, or like of manipulation tactics cults use. So it's behavior control, information control, thought control, and emotion control. So it's like those aspects, and like behavior control is like controlling your time, like what you do in your free time, and like controlling your behavior through like rewards or punishments, and controlling your sexuality is another big one. Just ways that if they can control your behavior, they're controlling you. And then there's like information control, which is like, do they use propaganda? Like, do they make their own propaganda and use it? Do they restrict you from looking up stuff about the religion online like they did me? They controlled that information. Thought control would be like critical thinking suppression and like thought stopping techniques. That's an example. And then like emotional control is like a big one that they use is shunning, because shunning like is scary, and it's a way that they manipulate you into staying into religions. So it's just like a list of those sort of things divided into what aspect they're controlling, and they're all very effective and they're all tested and used by every cult. Like, I literally thought like, well, even if my cult is a cult, even if my church is a cult, they're not one of the bad ones. Like they won't check this many boxes. And then I go through the BITE model and it's like 90% of it. And then like, I was like, oh God, and you look at other religions, 90% of it. They all use the same tactics because they work.
Yeah.
And you can see how when you explain it like that, and then you take someone like yourself who's very intelligent, but you were also very vulnerable. You were brand new in a new environment where you didn't have a lot of friends, and you can see how easily those tactics would work on you.
Yeah, well, and you're a kid. You're 18 years old.
Yeah, I'm not like a biblical scholar. I'm just like some dummy who was a Baptist and is now going to college trying to get stuff done, is now very alone. Like, I'm just figuring it all out. Very vulnerable spot because I'm not very aware of the world. It is a very good time to get picked up because, like, I was like I said before, love bombing is super effective. And it's because I didn't have any friends. Like, when I got there, I had like one friend, but he kind of already had his own friends there. He'd been there already. So like when these girls who are my age are just super stoked to just hang out with me and they buy me stuff and they tell me I'm awesome, I'm like, wow, these are great friends. It worked so well. Like, it worked on me so well because I was lonely.
Sure.
So like those tactics, yeah, are they just exploit, they just know how to exploit how humans work. So the bite model is a very good summary of those things.
Yeah. And, obviously in history, and not even long ago, there's been mass suicides and, things of that nature. And so, do you see any, have you gone down a rabbit hole of kind of looking for cults right now and seeing, kind of some of the ones that may lead in that direction?
Yeah. Once I realized I was in one, I wanted to know all the ways that they were similar to other cults. So yeah, I did go down this rabbit hole of just like learning. I'm still in that rabbit hole really of just like learning. I'd just go one at a time and like learn about each group. And clearly these tactics work because it's happened. Thousands of religions or like groups have been cults, and just so effectively, like you mentioned, like mass suicide, that like no, that doesn't just happen. That is like a very calculated use of human psychology that like clearly works, because like that doesn't just happen. Like, and that is not something you convince people to do easily. So yeah, there are a lot of cults I've learned about. And you go down these rabbit holes and they use all the same tactics. There's such a pattern.
Mm-hmm. So if people want to find out where you are, what's the best place to find you?
Right now, just TikTok, scaredy cults. And I try to educate about, like the bite model, like we mentioned, is one of the most important resources. I know every single person I know who's left a cult has used the bite model. Every single one of them, it helped them. So I really wanted, I'm digging into the bite model, and also just sharing my story, because I've realized that like other people who are in these groups see similarities. And some of them like are kind of, I've noticed some people are like, oh shoot, I relate to this more than I thought I would. Like, and like I can see the wheels turning. So yeah, that's what I do on my TikTok Scaredy Cults, is I just share stories and we dig into like tactics that cults use. And in the future, safely, I would like to start trying to expose other cults from these people who are trusting me with their stories. So
Sure.
that's the goal.
Well, we wish you a lot of luck with it. You're obviously helping a lot of people. You're bringing a lot of information to the light, and hopefully you're helping yourself. And,
Yes.
we definitely hope that, and wish you the best on your healing journey, and, that you just continue to evolve and grow into the person you want to be now that you have your freedom back. So
Yeah, that's a really fun part of deconstruction so far. When you're leaving these cults, you get to like, it's like, I describe it as seeing color again for the first time after seeing only in black and white for a long time. So it is, if you're in the middle of deconstructing, it's very rewarding as well. Keep going.
Well, thank you so much for coming on. We will link your TikTok in our description so that people can find you and they can explore it for themselves. And, again, thank you for coming on. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for letting me talk about it. It's important stuff.
Absolutely.